Hello, and welcome back to the weekly astrology podcast, where we light our candles, we get cozy, and we talk all things cosmos. I am Sarah Posh, astrologer and coach, and I will be hosting today's episode where we get to cover the final transits of this beautiful Libra lunar cycle, which means that we're getting to the sun in Scorpio and those grand water trines with Jupiter in Cancer and Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. Did you check out those Taurus full moon horoscopes that were posted in last week's episode? If you haven't, make sure that you do, because we talked about this last phase, last reinvention moment that Uranus and Taurus is bringing. And that means with Uranus and Taurus, these grand water trines with the sun in Scorpio are actually forming a kite. Yes, the release point, the lightning bolt of clarity and activation for the sun's grand water trines is going to be with the opposition to Uranus and Taurus. Go ahead, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and maybe turn your notifications on. That way you're never going to miss a new episode when it comes out. We're also going to cover Mercury and Jupiter's station retrograde and the second in our series of 5 conjunctions between Mercury and Mars. If you didn't already, check out that focus topic episode on the 5 conjunction series between Mercury and Mars and how this retrograde conjunction at 6 degrees Sagittarius this week plays into that bigger timeline unfolding all the way through April 2026. All right, with that, let's go ahead. On Sunday, November 9th, we have Mercury stationing retrograde at 6 degrees of Sagittarius. Mercury is going to be retrograde from November 9th through November 29th. And this means that Mercury is going to get 2 more rounds of those grand water trines. When we first talked about this, I think it was in the Libra new moon episode on the channel, we talked about how Mercury is really lucking out with these grand water trines because it's the only planet to get multiple drafts. It gets to go back and edit and review and revise what it is that it wants to take in and bring out of the grand water trines. For me personally, that first Mercury grand water trine felt like this lessons learned. I wasn't expecting that, but looking back, it kind of makes sense. It was like all of this really helpful, constructive feedback, things that kind of were going wrong, but in reality, it was really valuable information so that we didn't just charge forward with some of the plans or the strategies that we had in place. This information is going to completely change the way that we move forward. And it was funny because that information came in, game plans changed, and then Mars went through the series of grand water trines, and it was like shit is moving. There was no slowing down the timelines that are starting to move forward. I really felt that quality of Mars being in domicile, participating in those grand water trines. So this Mercury retrograde, it's here to help us. So I'm curious. I want to hear how you guys are feeling. What do you feel about this Mercury retrograde coming up? Comment below. The other additional point about how it's starting on Sunday, November 9th, the moon is going to be at home in Cancer, applying to a conjunction to exalted greater benefic Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius and the ruler of Mercury as Mercury stations to turn back and go back into Scorpio, into the water trines, into the depths and the dark. So this combination of astrology, it really showcases to me that right now, this Mercury retrograde, it might be the luckiest thing that ever happened to us. This opportunity to look back, review, renegotiate before we move forward. Then on Tuesday, November 11th, Jupiter is going to station retrograde at 25 degrees of Cancer. And it's usually not until these outer planets, the slower moving planets, station retrograde in the sign that they're in, that we get that clear indication of what this transit is really about. This is the first time and the only time that Jupiter will station retrograde while it's in Cancer. Jupiter transits a sign for just over a year. And so Jupiter's been traveling all the way through Cancer, getting to 25 degrees since June in 2025, so earlier this summer. And now Jupiter's stationing, putting a stamp on what it's here to deliver. What is Jupiter in Cancer really about? You want to be really paying attention, even starting on Sunday when Mercury stations in Jupiter's sign and the moon's with Jupiter, all the way through that early part of the week, because there's going to be some tip-offs. There's going to be some helpful information or maybe some new clarity about the opportunity that Jupiter in Cancer is really here to bring us. This is a moment I just encourage everybody to really pay attention. If there's anything that stands out, if it feels like there's any sort of positive developments or major turning points in your favor, you'll definitely want to be putting yourself in an attitude of gratitude, because that's really how we make the most out of any Jupiter transit. Jupiter's generosity feeds on gratitude and appreciation. So the more that we're already appreciating what's already here, we're sending out that gratitude, we're giving what we can generously, then it's almost like Jupiter has more inspiration and motivation to deliver bigger for us. And Jupiter is going to be in Cancer all the the way through summer of 2026. So we're really only halfway through this Jupiter in Cancer transit. And the remaining transits that we're going to walk through in the rest of today's episode are all involving Jupiter in some shape or form. So this is not a time to try to rush past, or similar to when I was reflecting earlier about the first wave of the Mercury Grand Water Trines and how it didn't happen how I expected to. But in retrospect, it was actually really helpful feedback. If we slow down and look a little deeper with our hearts open to how it might be trying to help us, there might be some gold under the surface that we would miss if we were just trying to swim forward, just trying to swim past what seems like a challenge or seems like a slowdown. And that takes us perfectly into the next transit, which is going to be on Wednesday, November 12th. This is our second conjunction between now Mercury retrograde and Mars. This is happening at the degree that Mercury is stationed retrograde. So imagine Mars is moving forward, Mars is moving the plans forward, Mars is taking action, and it runs up against Mercury that just stopped, slowed all the way down, and is actually on its way back. It's like they're passing notes in the hallway, and Mars is kind of slipping Mercury some sort of secret tip-off, like a secret note being passed between class that's going to help Mercury go back and get what Mars needs in order to move forward more confidently, more strategically, especially when it gets to that third conjunction between Mercury and Mars in January. All right, I'm getting ahead of myself. Again, if you want to know more about that bigger timeline, go check out that video. It's on the channel. And then don't forget, this Mercury-Mars conjunction, it's ruled by that Jupiter that just stationed retrograde the day before. It's also happening between the only two planets that have gone through the Grand Water Trine so far. So pay attention to what's coming up around Wednesday, November 12th. What conversations or renegotiations, what kind of changes are being implemented? I'm almost imagining in the sign of Sagittarius, this conjunction with Mercury retrograde, it feels like that moment where we're pulling back our Sagittarius arrow, and this moment is saying, hold the line, hold the arrow, because Mercury is going to go back and it's going to get some sort of secret sauce, secret information that's going to give us a much better aim, a much better chance at hitting the target of what it is that we actually want to accomplish or the outcome that we actually want to create. And this is giving Mercury a chance to really help us out, to get to go back over the territory, those places where those grand water trines maybe started to show a bigger potential for our long-term gains in our trajectories. We're either going back because there's something more that we need to release before we can go forward. We're thinking Scorpio. We're thinking something to go into composting, something that we need to let die off in order to give more energy back into the things that are actually life-giving, that have a chance to really thrive in the future. There's something this Mercury is going to need to recover for us while it goes back into Scorpio, or a second chance to review maybe that constructive feedback from the first wave of the Grand Water Trines. We get to reconstruct our thinking and our planning for moving forward. And again, it might be that we're eliminating something, maybe potential distractions from the focal point being revealed. And that's actually such a beautiful transition into the next wave of transits, which is our Sun Grand Water Trines. I say that because the Sun coming into these aspects, we had Mercury, which is all about the mind, the perception, the exchanges and negotiations. And then we had Mars, which is all about the game plans, all about how we take action, who's on board, who's on our team. And then we've got the Sun. The Sun coming in is this moment of coherence. It's a moment of purification. The Sun is the central force in which all things revolve around. In astrology, archetypally, it has to do with things like our purpose, our vitality. It has to do with our identity and also those major plot lines or story arcs of our lifetime. The Sun also serves as our source of light and of life. So now with the Sun coming in, it's almost like we get this light underwater. We can see underwater. These grand water trines with the Sun in Scorpio, this is a season of clarifying the waters, of purification and coherence. Remember, the Sun in these grand water trines, it's also making that opposition to Uranus and Taurus. It's forming that astrological kite. And the opposition to Uranus, that's our release point. That's the point of tension that has to be resolved in order for this underwater kite to take flight. It's almost like the image of electricity meeting holy water. If you imagine Uranus as this lightning bolt striking into the water of these grand water trines, it's suddenly going to purify and illuminate what actually is true, what actually has coherence with the greater vision, with the greater purpose and the plot line of where we're going. Now it's like we're no longer leaking energy trying to hold contradictions in place. This opposition to Uranus, it is purification in the sense that it is eliminating, it is disrupting, and it is going to shock the system into coherence. Maybe that means we suddenly just shake off all of the things that were keeping us out of alignment with our true sense of who we are or where it is that we want to go. So maybe it shakes off or shocks out people pleasing. Maybe you finally come into coherence and you start acting with more authenticity. You start feeling more free and confident to actually follow your creative impulses, follow your creative genius. So this word coherence, this is really the key word that I want you to keep in mind as we move into the grand water trines with the sun in Scorpio. Coherence isn't necessarily perfection, but it is a harmonic resonance. This is about getting rid of anything that doesn't actually feed the life or even the fun, the joy of what it is that we're doing and where we're going. I'm almost imagining like this Uranus and Taurus opposition is that knickknack that you've kept in your room or in your house because maybe it was inherited, maybe it was an heirloom, maybe somebody gifted it to you and so it meant something to you before, but now every time you look at it, you just think about how guilty you feel for wanting to get rid of it, but you don't get rid of it. No, you have to get rid of it. It is time to get rid of it. It is time to clear the space, to let go of anything you're holding on to because of some guilt motivation or some sort of emotional attachment that's actually toxic because it's not in alignment. You're not being honest with yourself or maybe with somebody else about what you really like or what you really want, about what you really feel. The release point of this kite, of these grand water trines with the sun in Scorpio, this is that moment that requires you to be honest with yourself, honest with the people that you're in relationship with, or maybe in those negotiations with. Maybe it's just being honest about where you're going and how there's things about where you've been or what you've held on to that aren't going to come with you. They can't come with you. You don't want them to come with you. Genuinely, you don't want them to come with you. So it's time to be honest and it's time to come back into coherence. Coming back to that word purity, this electrical shock to the system, to the plans, to the vision. It's bringing us that purity, which isn't a moral perfection. I'm talking about the purity of unclouded essence. When water is pure, it is transparent enough for the light to pass through so that we can actually see to the bottom. This is like stripping away the people pleasing and the old stories. What remains is actually a pure current of why you do what you do. It could also be an emotional healing. There might be some sort of cathartic release or emotional cleansing. It's like the shock of the sobs lead to the purity of the tears, cleansing your heart, really allowing yourself that space for some honest grief, some honest closure. And it could also be this moment in relationships where we contact without projection. Maybe we're finally seeing somebody as they are, not through the fog of our history, our attachments, our expectations, or even disappointments and resentments. This is where the sun opposite Uranus needs you to shock the system, and that means shed and purify, coming back to what is essential, coming back to that full embodied coherence with the future trajectory, with this life that you're stepping into, these new storylines, these new life changes, these new potentials and possibilities that the grand water trines are gifting us to take into the future transits. You know, these decade-long changes of life with the outer planet ingresses that are starting really officially in 2026. We get the help with these grand water trines, but they can only help us as much as we're willing to come into coherence with where we're going and let go of what isn't coming with us. It starts on Sunday, November 16th, with the sun in Scorpio making a trine to Jupiter retrograde in Cancer. Then on Monday, November 17th, the sun in Scorpio is going to trine Saturn retrograde in Pisces. This is the same day that Mercury retrograde is making its sextile to Pluto. So this is some sort of stabilizing of foundations. Our plans are feeling more sturdy. There's some footing under our future planning. And Mercury's retrograde, so maybe it's people from the past. Maybe you're bringing someone back on board, but they're coming back in a different role. This is some sort of role change or management change that might be coming into play. It might be bringing people from the past, or it might be letting somebody go so you can open that space up so that it's available for when Mercury's direct and makes its third and final sextile to Pluto in Aquarius. That might be when we actually see some sort of signing somebody back on board or signing somebody new. But pay attention to this Monday, November 17th date and what's coming into clarity around the people that are involved, the roles, the management positions, or maybe some sort of promotions that are happening. What I also love about the Sun's Grand Water Trine happening at this point in the cycle is that the moon is in its balsamic phase. This means that this is the smallest amount of light that the moon has before it enters into that new moon. Its darkest point in a conjunction with the sun, which this next new moon, it actually is in a conjunction with Mercury retrograde as well. Don't worry, we'll get to that in our next episode. But for now, consider the fact that this balsamic moon, when we think about that phase of the moon, this is really where the past and the future, they overlap. The timelines are blurred. And often when we read online, or I've heard other astrologers talk about the balsamic moon as this ancient moon, the moon of the end or endings, about the past. Sometimes it talks a lot about past lifetimes, karmic completions, and I actually am born with a balsamic moon. And something that I viscerally feel about living with this moon phase is that yes, it does feel like there is so much finality and focus on karmic completions. I recognize that I have a lot of people that I meet that I'm like, I know you. I feel like I've met you before. They're very karmic relationships, and sometimes they serve just as that kind of container for a karmic completion, a karmic contract finding its end. But the thing that I don't hear talked about that I feel is very true about the balsamic moon is that my deeper, almost unconscious willingness to bring things to a close, the thing that motivates me to be courageous enough to be willing to walk away, is the sense of a better future. This is even further emphasized by looking at the sky. When do we see the balsamic moon in the sky? We see it in the morning sky. The balsamic moon, the end of the lunar phase, the moon is rising before the sun. The moon is previewing how this ending is actually foreshadowing the future that has yet to unfold. So there's almost this felt psychic sense of what's possible and what's ahead that I can't prove through any sort of logic or reason, but there's something about that balsamic moon, it's calling me forward. There's a faith in the future in that balsamic moon. So think about how this balsamic moon, its sliver of light, is a reflection of the sun in Scorpio going through these grand water trines and that opposition to Uranus, and maybe use this as a time to more deeply reflect, not only on the future, but also on the completions, on the closures, on the endings. Think about how they're connected. That morning rising balsamic moon is showing and reflecting this light of what's yet to come. And the more we can lean into letting go, the more we can lean into that process of purification, coming back into what is essential, coming back into coherence, truly acting in full embodied integrity in who we are and why we do what we do and where it is that we want to go. I imagine this sun grand water trine, it could activate a whole new level of flow. It could bring everything into alignment where there's no longer leaky holes in our boats. There's no longer distractions pulling our currents in different directions, like winds blowing the surface of our water and our flow in all sort of directions. And also this process of purification, this idea of purity as leading to and really being a sense of coherence. How is this week, this invitation, or how are you inviting this invitation, leaning into where you can remove any sort of distortion, so that your whole system, your life system, your sense of self, your relationships, the work that you do, the choices that you're making right now, they can really resonate together in a natural, harmonious coherence. And this is what makes you an even more clear channel or clear vessel, so that all of your creative and emotional energy can move through unblocked, like sunlight shining through a clear glass, or like sound coming through a clear frequency on a clear channel, or even water flowing in a clear direction. This is how we're going to round out this lunar cycle in this week's episode. Next week, we're going to get into that Scorpio new moon. Remember, this Scorpio new moon, we are going into the depths of the depths of the depths. We've got this new moon at 28 degrees of Scorpio in a conjunction to Mercury retrograde. So that means that Mercury in its underworld journey has reached its halfway point and is getting this infusion, not just with the sun, but with this new moon. So there's an incredible turning point, but it's deep underground. And that's how the Scorpio new moon starts. I'm really excited to get to that new moon and to get to that episode where we're going to talk about all of the magic that's happening in this fertile soil of the unknown, this mystery of the darkness. So make sure, if you haven't already, please like this video, share this video with any friends or family that you think might benefit from the content. And also make sure you subscribe to the channel and you turn those notifications on. That way you're never gonna miss a new episode when it comes out. And if you're somebody who's looking for more resources or support, I have my one-on-one astrology consultation linked below this episode, as well as our Saturn and Aries digital product that's also linked below. And one thing I want to clarify, because I've been getting some questions, people are like, well, Saturn's not in Aries. Babe, this workshop, this digital product, it is not just about Saturn and Aries. That's really only the last maybe third of the entire recording. We go deep into all things Saturn, and there's so much valuable information that you can take with you through any and all Saturn transits. So the current Saturn transit that's completing in Pisces, as well as that future transit with Saturn in Aries. And it will also give you information and data for investigating and learning more about living with your natal placement of Saturn. So be sure to check that out. It's linked below. Thank you all so much for joining me today and getting cozy and talking cosmos. I'm your host, Sarah Posh, astrologer and coach, and I will see you here next week in the dark underground Scorpio new moon episode.